What kind of super ager are you? Go to ageist.com/quiz. Take the super ager quiz, and we'll send you directed, personalized information to help you super age the best that you can. I'm David Stewart, and welcome to the Ageist podcast. I started Ageist to champion people like us, to ensure that we can feel informed, healthy, and proud, and age well. Everything we do here is dedicated to helping you age better. And who doesn't want that? Today's show is sponsored by Fatty 15. Fatty 15 features the first essential fatty acid to be discovered in 90 years and is on a mission to restore your long-term health. Go to fatty15.com/ageist. Use the code AGEIST at checkout for 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit. Today's show is brought to you by Suppco, the first of its kind supplement tracker and optimizer that helps me organize and improve my supplement stack. Go to supp.co/ageist for free access to the app. Today's show is also brought to you by Blue Zone's Kitchen. They make delicious, ready-to-heat meals crafted for longevity and inspired by the Blue Zones. Let Blue Zone's Kitchen help you eat better this year. Check out the link in our show notes to get $2 off any Blue Zone's Kitchen bowl. Welcome to episode 221 of the Super Age Podcast. Great to have you with us. This is going to be dropping on January the 29th, 2025. This week on the show, we have Neil Markey. And Neil is part of the Beckley Foundation. And he's going to talk to us about psychedelics, about psilocybin mushrooms, and places you can go to experience these things and why you would want to do it. He's an Army veteran, Special Forces, and he had some trouble reacclimating to society. But now what they're finding is people who are not involved with some sort of trauma, who are not trying to overcome trauma, but are really just trying to open up their sphere of what they think is possible, are going to these retreats under tight supervision, just to be clear about that, and a lot of follow-ups. We're going to talk about that and find out what that's about, talk about his journey, and investigate whether this is something for someone else. So we're going to get with Neil Markey after a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Fatty 15. The story here is that Fatty 15 co-founder Dr. Stephanie Venn Watson discovered C15 while working with the U.S. Navy to improve the health and welfare of aging dolphins. Just a little shout out to our super aging dolphin listeners out there. Her discovery marks the first essential fatty acid to be found in over 90 years. C15 is known to work in a few ways. It repairs age-related damage to our cells, it protects our cells from future breakdown, boosts mitochondrial energy output, and activates those pathways in the body that help regulate things like sleep and mood. Fatty 15 is on a mission to replenish your C15 levels and restore your long-term health. You can get an additional 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit by going to fatty15.com/ageist and using the code AGEIST at checkout. Hey guys, I'm organizing my supplements for 2025 right now, and I found an app that's pretty interesting to me and I wanted to share it. It's called Suppco, and it helps me to track and improve every part of my supplement routine. It's helpful even if you take a couple of products. I've been using it for a month now, and while I know a lot about supplements, there are a few things about Suppco that have really helped me. Suppco has an amazing tool that helps me refine my daily routine, and they analyze every product you take, your goals, and then give you real tips to improve. So that might be adding a nutrient like CoQ10 for your heart, or swapping out an overly expensive brand for a cheaper one that's still high quality. And best of all, they match you with their expert-built protocols, and they have 80 plus plans like essential heart health and memory support to guide your personal goals. Suppco is currently in beta, but my listeners can get 100% free access today if you go to supp.co/ageist, supp.co/ageist. Definitely check it out now because it won't be free forever. I've tried the whole app and I think it's pretty great. Check it out and let me know what you think. All right, let's give Neil Markey a call and find out about psilocybin in a retreat setting and whether it's good for you or me or anyone else. Neil, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, David.
Where does this podcast find you today?
I'm in Costa Rica, Nosara.
Oh, the Nosara Peninsula, an amazingly beautiful place.
It's stunning. Yeah, I love it here. I was here last year for a bit and I'm back this year for a bit. One of my teammates is here, so it's a great excuse to go south and co-locate with a teammate and get some work done. And I'm trying to learn how to surf, although it's been slow going.
I do a lot of sports. That is the single hardest sport I have ever learned.
How's it?
Well, it's super humbling. It's super hard because With any other sport, say you want to learn to snowboard or something, you're actually doing it several hours a day. With surfing, you first have to get out there, which is no easy thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
so you've managed to like get out there and survive. Okay, you're past the break. Now you have to identify the proper wave, which also takes a lot of wave knowledge and like figuring that out. And then maybe you get up on your board for 3 seconds, 5 seconds, and then it's game over and again. So it requires a lot of time. It is also the most beautiful sport I've ever done.
It's really magic. And I feel like for this work, I've been
Yeah,
a meditator for quite some time. It's like the perfect sport for me to kind of
yeah.
integrate meditation because it's not about how strong you are. It's
No.
it's this presence, and you've got to be in the moment and in sync. You're trying to sync up with the ocean in some ways. And man, when I'm out there, if I'm in my head, and thinking about all the million number of things, then it doesn't work. And if you can kind of
No.
get in clear headed and get in sync and get out of your own way, it's and that is this kind of like idea of like gracefulness is not like supernatural for me. So it takes a lot of work for me to get there, but it's fun.
That's very well said. It helps to be strong when you get out there, but you can't muscle a wave like that.
Right. It's all,
Uh,
and there's so many, I don't know, I just find so many metaphors with life, and I love it.
we digress. Tell
We
us,
digress.
tell us about your background.
Sure. I usually start, I grew up in Maryland. I went to University of Maryland. I was studying math and thought I was going to go do cryptology, not like crypto similar, but crypto for encryption.
Mhm.
And a lot of Maryland math grads go to the three-letter agencies around DC. And then September 11th happened, and you could actually see the smoke at the top of the Maryland football stadium from the Pentagon.
Mm.
And it was a huge day in my life. Long story short, I ended up
Mm.
joining the officer program, finished school, went into the Army as a lieutenant, thinking I was doing the right thing. I believed the whole weapons of mass destruction thing, like many. But like by the time I finished school and got through training, we'd kind of realized that was, we missed that one pretty bad. So that was challenging. And I went to Iraq as a lieutenant and then got a chance to go try out for this small special operations unit called the Ranger Regiment. Went to Afghanistan twice with them. I loved it. It was really adventurous, and got to meet some really incredible human beings. Leroy Petrie got the Medal of Honor when I was there, and his locker was right next to mine. So it was this kind of, I was constantly in awe of some of these guys I was working with, but it was also wildly traumatic, and I was a really fortunate one. I was removed from the worst of it. I was more of a planner and a coordinator as an officer, but it left some marks on me for sure, and I got out in 2012 and went to grad school, and I was doing well professionally by many measures, but was also struggling emotionally in a big way and was isolating a bit, and some bad habits were kind of coming into my life. And it was in grad school where I got, finally, after trying a bunch of different Western medicine interventions like SSRIs and anti-anxiety medications and sleeping pills, I got introduced to meditation. And that was, I think, the beginning of me learning this kind of whole different way to live. And that was in 2012. And I've had like corporate career and everything since then, but that was kind of the beginning of me getting into this holistic well-being world and the use of plants.
Before we go there, I want to talk a little bit about symptoms. Is that right? So, what were you experiencing when you came back from the military that caused you to want SSRIs and some of these other things?
Yeah, I just didn't feel well. I was really angry, and I
Mhm.
remember that first year of school. It was 2012, and so most Americans had like forgotten about the wars, frankly, but we sure didn't, I mean, I got out of Afghanistan in 2011 and started school like 6 months later, and all the students were so happy, and they'd been living a great life the past 10 years, and I was so angry at them that they didn't care that there was a war going on. I was having trouble sleeping. I was very irritable. And then if you're not sleeping, I mean, everything's downhill from there.
Yeah.
You're just in a bad mood all the time. Then your relationships struggle. my central nervous system was just smoked. It's
Mm.
just exhausted and was in this state that I think a lot of veterans and actually a lot of professionals, if they overdo it, end up in this state where your central nervous system is just, it's burnt out, and you're just in this place where you're kind of tired and wired. There's a
Yeah.
lot of adrenaline pumping through your body still, but you're just exhausted. And so it's a really, you don't feel well, you don't feel well at all.
And you started meditation. That has to be like a whole other world from in your service. You were in combat. Like that's a very
It,
different place.
it is, and it's interesting because I remember when I stumbled into this meditation for business leaders course at Columbia University that was being taught by this guy by the name of Hom Nguyen, who was doing his PhD there. And I walked in kind of not knowing what I was getting into. But as soon as like after that first course, I was like, I need this, and it was very intuitive and I kind of started devoting a lot of time to it. But interestingly, my first exposure to meditation was actually in the special operations community. They were trying to get it more integrated into the training because for a long time, we've known that elite athletes
Mm.
have used it to be at the best, right? Because
Right.
there's this
Right.
flow state you want to be in.
Right.
So you train, 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 train. And then in the game, you want to get out of your head and you just want to like, let it flow. And the Delta guys that we would work with, they meditated, more in a more disciplined way. Where the Rangers, I didn't see a lot of meditation in that community, but the guys that were at that next level up, meditation was actually quite common. But even at the time, even though I respected the Delta guys, I still thought it was a bit silly. I just didn't understand why. I didn't quite fully grasp why they were going to take time to do that before going on missions. Now I get it. Meditation, I think in some ways it's foundational. It gets bucketed together oftentimes with it's just another kind of modality of well-being. But to me, it actually is at the base, and
Mm.
it's kind of unique and it's really important. It's hard to get people to do it. It's really hard to convince people to do it for long enough to be able to experience the benefits.
And tell me about where you are now. How did that happen?
The Beckley Foundation was started by this really iconic woman by the name of Amanda Fielding, who's in her 80s now. And she's actually, she's from the UK. She's a countess, which just adds to her uniqueness and character. And she had some mystical experiences in her youth using psychedelics and just thought that there was something really powerful there and really spent the last 60 years through charisma and willpower corralling some of the world's top researchers to look into these compounds. And she started the Beckley Foundation in 1998 to do it more officially. But they've been one of the real leaders in, keeping this dream alive that there was something here, and also, pushing where they could on drug policy reform across the world. And she knew you really needed to do both of those strategies. So it's really hard to do good research if the laws are so restrictive. Yeah. That they're preventing the research. And it's really hard to change the laws if you don't have data to lobby. So the Beckley Foundation was really pushing on both those things across the globe for the last, 25, 30 years. And what's even more admirable for me when I think about Amanda is that for most of her career in life, the majority of the world and the established medical communities thought she was nuts. Her family keeps these articles of the UK press where they're dragging her through the mud because she wanted to legalize cannabis. And they calling her all kinds of names like she was this mad woman. And
Mm.
now the world has shifted and people are starting to see that there's benefits and not every, but many respected universities have psychedelic research programs. And so Amanda is finally getting some of this credit, and it's just super beautiful to see her start to get some of the recognition she's deserved for quite some time. So that's the foundation. And then there's been some companies that have sprouted kind of out of that group of individuals and philanthropists and supporters.
So how did you come to psychedelics?
Yeah, it was through the network that I met in the meditation community. And I was able to have some professionally facilitated psychedelic experiences after I got out of the service, after I had done meditation for some time. And for me, those experiences in some ways felt like they were accelerating what I was trying to do with meditation.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I still have 10 years in, I think, or 12 years in, haven't quite found the language to describe it because in some ways it's like non-mind, so it's
Right.
but this, meditation's about, being present, being embodied, being here in the now. And, when you're in that fight or flight state, in some ways it's the opposite of that. You're in this very activated, looking externally because you're trying to avoid threats. And so psychedelics have some way, we don't really understand the mechanics super well, like what's happening, but they have some way of settling down the central nervous system if done in the correct way, allowing there to be more presence, and they can create more clarity, so I think that we end up creating all these narratives about ourselves, about others, about our relation to the world, and they have some way of kind of clearing the glass, if you will, and then you can see things more objectively. And then from there, you have the ability to make change more effectively when you see things more clearly. And so I think they're very complementary to meditation and what they can do. And if you look at the history of use in more traditional cultures, indigenous cultures, there was a lot of mindfulness, intentionality, ritual, meditation around the use of them. And I think there's a reason for that, and so that's, a big part of the programs that we run too, is, trying to teach some of these awareness practices. We're super supportive of what's happening in the clinics. You can go have a experience in more of like a doctor's office, and they're treating these compounds as more of just like another pharmaceutical. And, if they work in that way, then, and they're less toxic than others, then and the data looks good, great. Let's have that. That's a accessible way for people. And there's a way to use them that's a little bit different how we would typically use pharmaceutical, that's quite profound and different. And we're hoping to bring some more awareness to that, because there's something really, really special there if they're used in a certain way.
There's a lot that I want to go back to there and unpack. Mm-hmm. Listening to your description, and I understand the difficulty of putting words to something like this, but what I'm hearing is this expanding the capacity of a belief system. So adding more flexibility into one's belief system, I guess, to how they filter the world. Would that be right?
Yeah. I think so. I think that's a good way of putting it. I mean, I also describe people, we'll have a lot of times down uber successful professionals will come on our program with us, and they're like, well, I don't want to lose my edge. Right. I don't want to do something and it's going to make me like, and I'm like, well, they're never limiting. They open. So then you just have more range. So you can always go back to the way you were, but now you can see that maybe there's another way to be, and then you can choose, So I kind of like the language that you use too. They open up the aperture in some way.
Right. For yourself, you came from combat. So that's a particularly sort of experience. And as you said, when you came back, there was a lot of trauma and adjustment that had to happen, which caused you a lot of difficulties. For someone, however, who's, say, already, like as you said, doing fairly well, they don't have any of this symptomology, they're probably highly functional out in the world, and these sort of folks come to you. Talk to me a little bit about that, like without, naming names. What do they say when they come to you? What are they looking for?
Yeah. And I think it's a really great question, because I think right now the conversation around psychedelic use is on this more clinical end of the spectrum. It's like getting people from really bad states to more normal, healthy states. Yeah. But you can also go from normal, healthy to more empathetic, more creative, more open, more present. And so that's mostly what our guests are looking for. And our guests generally are very successful leaders, entrepreneurs that have already spent a lot of time and resource on self-development and understanding themselves. And then this is like the next kind of logical step for them. And a lot of our guests come down with a few different kind of desired outcomes, if you will. They want to make change in their life. We hear a lot of times people be like, I just feel like I'm stuck in this kind of pattern and I can't break the pattern. These types of programs are great for that. Again, they kind of open things up, they create this clarity, and then with that clarity, you can make some just different decisions. We'll have guests come down that want to process loss. They've just lost their job or had a divorce or something. And there's this transition point in their life, and they want to honor it. They don't want to forget it, but they want to move past it, and they want to kind of closure and then step into a new way of being. I think our programs are really great for that. Many of our guests have had meditation practices for some time, and they want to go further. They want to develop a spiritual connection. They want to have better relationships. We'll have many times couples come down, father, son, mother, daughter, and they'll do it together. And then, we have people that are just a little bit adventurous and want to explore and want to do it safely, but are quite curious around, this world of expanded states and, want to explore all there is to explore in this life. So yeah, it's a really beautiful thing.
This is wonderful. So tell me, I'm somewhat familiar with the clinical application. We've had folks come on and talk about that, ketamine principally under guidance. Could you tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what does that look like? What is an experience like if I came to you and I said, hey, I want to explore this. I feel reasonably okay, but I think I could be better if I knew about some other things out here.
Yeah.
What would you do with me?
Yeah, we would take good care of you. I'll tell you a bit about the program. So we have a kind of signature program that's more of like an integrative health program that uses psychedelics as a catalyst for change. And so it's a 5-night immersive experience with 2 psilocybin mushroom experiences. But before the immersive, we have a digital prep. And so, we have a screening process. We make sure that you're a good fit for our programs. And then we get you into the preparation phase where it's mostly self-directed, but you get access to our program. And then we're teaching meditation, we're teaching mindful movement, we're teaching, some basic well-being practices, because really what we want is to give people these safe experiences, because that'll create perception change. But we want to put some habits in place. Because if you don't build new habits, you're probably going to revert back to the normal, because there's so much momentum there by the time you're a young adult or an older adult. There's just it's wired in us pretty deeply. And so we're teaching you skills, and then we have a couple sessions where we bring the group together. So all of our programs are done in groups, generally 15 guests. And we're big believers in the group model because, you just have to experience it sometime. But a lot of the change that's taking place is taking place with the support of the group. So there's a different dynamic that happens with when you go in one-on-one with a therapist, and that's still positive. But there's something that's really special about doing it with a group of other individuals that are all looking to try and do the same thing together. And so we looked at adult learning and habit change science and group dynamics. And, there's a way to bring a group of people together and kind of get those bonds started. And we try and do that in that prep, so that when people come down on the immersive portion, we can kind of get right to it, right? Because they've already met, they've already shared, we've already kind of gotten that process started. There's some familiarity with the facilitators. Then we get people down on site. We do programs in Jamaica and the Netherlands right now. It's the 2 places in the world really where we can do psilocybin mushrooms fully legally. So there's no kind of gray area challenges. We're fully above board, we're insured. We know where the mushrooms come from. We test them. So it's all above board, which, there's places where you can do it that's a bit more gray, and some are great, some are not so great. If you do it there, just need to ask more questions. But we really like being in a place where we're not hiding from anyone. And our properties that we use are, beautiful estates. They're away from everything. So it's like, time to reconnect with nature, digital detox. It's just you and the team, and you can really kind of settle in. And then we're doing a lot of those practices that we taught in the prep, but now we're doing them together in nature. So we do morning meditation and mindful movement, and we're doing, nature immersion. And then, the highlight is those two, probably the highlight. Some people actually have more, say that the breath work sessions that we do had more of an impact. But for most, the psilocybin sessions are the big events. And those are done in a group format. And we try and find this balance between tradition and modernity and east west, if you will. And so we have like rigorous safety protocols, but we also allow for some of the magic. So we play live music. If you look at how this work is done in more traditional ways or indigenous cultures, there's a lot of ceremony to it or ritual to it. And we believe that actually impacts the experience. That has a meaningful impact on outcomes, because even if you look at Western medicine, there's all this phenomena around mindset. So like the placebo effect, what people believe, very meaningful impact on outcome. So we looked at what was happening in the more traditional environments and said, hey, can we learn from some of these people that have been doing this for thousands of years? And there's probably something that's quite important here. So we integrate some of that, right? The mindfulness, the intentionality, we make it special. And the sessions usually last 5 to 6 hours. Everyone gets their own custom dose of the mushrooms. So that's a discussion between them and the senior facilitators. But it's within a predefined range, a safe range, which is around what you would see in a clinical trial in the United States or the UK. And then, there's intentional downtime, and there's beautiful food, and it's gorgeous locations. So in Jamaica, you can go to the beach, and the Netherlands, it's, beautiful forests. And then when the program concludes, we start that same week with a roughly 6-week digital follow-up. It's mostly self-directed, but we bring the group back together a couple times, because this is where we're like, hey guys, this is the opportunity that, when you have these higher dose experiences, there's a window. It's a couple weeks to a couple months. Everybody's different. The dose makes a difference. So it's hard to say definitively, but for some period of time after these higher dose experiences, the body is in this more neuroplastic state, this more malleable state.
Right.
And so this is what we just try and get people for that 6 weeks or 8 weeks afterwards. It's like, commit to the meditations, commit to the morning gratitude practice, commit to getting in nature more. And if you do that in that window, it looks like there's more likelihood that it'll stick. And then you can kind of maintain these benefits for quite some time if you get the habit change. And so that's kind of the main program that we run today.
That's exactly where I was going to go, like integration. I've heard it said like, okay, you can go to Burning Man and have an experience. Okay. But that's, you're not being integrated. As you described this neuroplasticity phase, how do you make sure that whatever the changes, can I use the word enlightenment? Is that okay? Is that a weird word? But okay.
I'm fine with it. Yeah.
Okay. So like with that experience, how do we integrate that so that, as you said, there's, however many decades of momentum up against this, and we want to integrate some of these things to benefit ourselves going forward. What are the techniques you use to integrate these experiences going forward?
Yeah, there's many. And some of them, it's interesting because I think there's this middle path too, where again, part of integration is reflecting on this experience with the mind and thinking through what we learned and how that will impact our life, right? And so that's part of it, like a Western psychotherapy kind of path. But then there's also just getting the mind out of the way. For many, Westerners, the mind's kind of the problem. The mind's a bit overactive, and we don't want to just have a mystical experience and then get on this loop again and self-assess ourselves from another angle. It's kind of stopping that for a while. So meditation is super important. Time in nature is super important, right? We're kind of chronically disconnected from nature, but we're part of nature, and we need that. It's a feedback loop, so there's a mix of kind of these mind practices and body practices that we really encourage people to do post these experiences to develop like a different way to think, but also a different way to be. It's just interesting because if you look at the indigenous cultures, they don't have a 6-week integration period after their psychedelic experiences because they're living a more integrated life. They're in nature, they're in community, they're very present. They don't have all this distraction. They don't know what's going on all over the world. We can learn from that and also understand that many people that are having these experiences from the Western world are living in a very different context. So they needed to actually do different things than you would see traditionally. So it's a blend. It's really fascinating.
Interesting. And if someone wanted to do this, which sounds fascinating to me, you totally have my interest in this, what would one do?
Yeah, I mean, they can check out our website. It's just beckleyretreats.com. And if you Google us, we'll come up. And then, we're a relatively small company, so we'll make time to get on a one-on-one call and answer any questions. And it's not uncommon for us to have a few calls with someone because they have some questions and they go and talk with their partner and then they have some more questions. And we're super up for doing that because it's a big commitment in terms of time and resource. So we want to make sure people have everything they need to make that decision. And yeah, I guess just reach out. We're here. And I'm wildly biased, of course, but I think we have one of the more thoughtful programs. And I think we've got some of the best facilitators out there. And it's a really beautiful thing.
I'm particularly curious about this idea of, like I say, people like me who are reasonably functional out there in the world. We do things, we're fairly high achieving. And what do they say to you after they go to the retreat and then there's this 6 to 8 week integration period? What are they saying that they're different or they've learned? What's changed for them?
Yeah, man, it's so many things. And look, I'll give you a couple. Oh, maybe I'll tell you a story of a friend of mine who was also a special operations officer, but then went on to be super successful, went to an Ivy League graduate school and similar background and very high functioning, and came on a program a couple years ago with us and was quite skeptical coming in. He's like, I'm kind of doing, I'm doing okay. But I'm curious. And he came through and I was there on site with him. So I got to kind of see some of the shifts happening live. And then I caught up with him the week after, and it was just a phone call. So I couldn't see him, but I was asking him how he was doing. I could hear he was getting emotional. And I was like, well, what are you noticing shifting? He's like, well, man, he had a 4-year-old son. So he's like, the biggest shift that I noticed is his relationship with his son. He said before he went on the program, he could never get his son to come to him at bedtime. His son only wanted to go to mom. And it would drive him nuts because he couldn't understand why he couldn't create that relationship. And he was bribing him and all kinds of things. Nothing was working. He said, when he got back home that same week, his son was coming to him in the evening. And so we don't understand fully the mechanics here of what's happening, but something changed in his central nervous system. And we know now that as human beings, we're electromagnetic. We can pick up on each other's central nervous system. So his central nervous system was doing something that was making his son uncomfortable, which changed dramatically enough in just a week's time that his son felt comfortable being near his dad. And he was crying, telling me this story, So it's like, wow, how do you put a value on that? It's incredible. We had another couple, our oldest couple yet, 80-year-old woman, 86-year-old man, very successful kids, lived all over the world, amazing life, came down as spiritual explorers. And they were happy, they were fine. And then we've caught up with them, many times since. But after the program, they said that they had no desire whatsoever to drink alcohol anymore. And now every morning have a little session with tea together where they do their morning meditations. And they say it was the most meaningful experience of their life. It can be really incredible, but people will report, more sense of peace, sense of awe, right? We get so wrapped up in our days and then we forget that we're miracles. It's miraculous, us here talking with each other. And objectively, you and me, if you think about it from a historical perspective, we're in the 0.0001% in terms of access to opportunities and wealth. And then we can still, nitpick our lives and be in these moods. And these experiences, again, they create that clarity where you're like more often in this sense of awe and gratitude. And you're like, my God, I'm so fortunate. And that's great. It just makes people generally feel better and be able to connect with others in a more heart-centered way.
That sounds like a beautiful thing.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why would you not want that?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like nothing you've ever done. It's beyond word. So if you're an adventurer that wants to explore things in this short life that we have, it's quite the experience. It's quite profound.
Amazing. Neil, this sounds wonderful. We're going to leave in the show notes contact, website, and things like that. I guess I have to ask you, has anything bad ever happened?
Well, sometimes guests have challenging experiences. Actually, it's quite common. It depends on how you define bad. Now, I think for us, there's traumatic experiences and challenging experiences. And traumatic experiences I would define as, if you ask the person a month later, would they do it again? They'd say, no, that was too much. That was a mistake. I think if you do this work with all the right controls in place, you do good prep, you do good screening, you have proper facilitation, good set and setting, you can really mitigate traumatic experiences. Can you get it to zero? Probably not, but I think you can get it to less than 1%, and our data would say that. But for some people, very few, it was a lot for them, Now, a lot of people will have challenging experiences where, again, we don't understand the mechanics of what's going on here, but many people relive some of this past trauma. And we know, we have some more theories now around where trauma is actually stored. It's not just up here. It's like in the tissue, it's in the body. And these experiences have some way of releasing it, and then it comes to the surface, and then it's right there. And so for some period of time, that can be a lot, because you might have had that tucked away somewhere and it was more manageable. Now, it's probably seeping up through your subconscious and into your life. It's probably affecting how you're showing up. It's probably affecting your relationships, but it's managed. Now, you have an experience like this, and then all of a sudden that thing's right in front of you again. That can be tough. And so, that's part of our program, is helping people understand that this is a potential outcome and letting them be ready for it. But those people that have challenging experiences, the vast, vast majority of them, if you ask them later, they'd be like, thank God, because now I know it, I still remember it, but it's not as much a part of me. It's lighter now. And so that's the kind of difference there. And then, there are other risks, and I think it's important for us. It's like, we don't want to overestimate the benefits and underestimate the risks. We want to try and, shoot it straight. And so there's a condition called like HHPD, which is, if you have one of these experiences, then sometime in the future you can have a lighter experience, and some people will have that. It's, again, few, the number's low. And of that number, what's interesting though is most of the people that have that experience enjoyed it. They like that they can feel that experience again. But some subset of that is like, nah, it made me a bit uncomfortable. So that's a real risk. But what I think is important to do is, you got to compare the risk reward of these experiences to the risk reward of our other daily activities and things that we do. And aspirin has risks, SSRIs have risks, oxycodone has risks, alcohol has risks, driving at night has risks, mountain biking has risks, and they all have potential benefits. And so I think you need to look at the full context and then evaluate it for yourself. For me, you look at mushrooms and you get proper set and setting, proper dosing, you do it all right. You compare the potential risks versus the potential outcomes. It's a no-brainer. Now, that's my personal risk assessment, but I think, everyone needs to do that risk assessment for themselves. But I think that, relative compared to a lot of what we get from the pharmaceutical industry, or, you name it, I would say that the risk here is equal or lesser than many things that we do quite regularly. So I think it's important to have it in that context.
Amazing. Neil, is there anything you'd like to leave our people with today?
Just that we're here, we're here to try and be helpful. And if anybody has questions, just to reach out. We're happy to find some time.
Super. This has been wonderful. You may see me
Thank
in
you, David.
Jamaica.
Amazing. We'd love to have you down.
It sounds really fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking, and wishing you a wonderful rest of the day in Costa Rica.
Thank you, David. Nice to speak with you too.
Take care. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.
Okay, that was great. Big thanks to Neil Markey for joining us on the show today. I found that this was very interesting. I got to say, I'm really curious about this. As Neil said, it's really about just adding another tool to the toolbox, right? So it opens up things that perhaps we don't know about, and we can access these at other points where they could be useful to us. They could be helpful to others around us. So I'm really curious about this, and I'm contemplating going down to Jamaica and visiting Neil and seeing what this is about. I got some other things going on. We got some scheduling stuff to work out, but I'm really curious about this, much less frightened about it than I was. If you would have asked me this 5 or 10 years ago, I would have said, no way on earth would I be doing something like this. But, times change, and we learned. We're going to get with Just Try This after a quick word from our sponsors. This show is also brought to you by Blue Zone's Kitchen. They make delicious, ready-to-heat meals crafted for longevity and inspired by the Blue Zones, the longest-lived regions of the world. Co-founded by National Geographic fellow and #1 New York Times bestselling author Dan Buettner, these nourishing farm-to-freezer meals are available at Whole Foods nationwide. If you're prioritizing your longevity this 2025, then Blue Zone's kitchen meals are for you. Their bowls are made with only real, whole food, plant-based ingredients, and ingredients are directly sourced to ensure flavor from farm to freezer. Each of their meals has at least 10 grams of protein and 6 grams of fiber. One of my favorites is the Sesame and Ginger Bowl, which is made with carrots, edamame, broccoli, and brown rice. Let Blue Zone's Kitchen help you eat for longevity this year. You can find Blue Zone's kitchen meals in the freezer aisle at select Whole Foods market stores and many other retailers. Check out the link in our show notes to get $2 off any Blue Zone's kitchen bowl. What's going on around here? I am still in Manhattan. I will be presenting at the Global Wellness Institute. Big presentation on their trend reports. I wrote one. I've never written a trend report. That was quite a mental struggle for me. And I actually learned a ton. I got to interview a lot of really interesting people. And that was presented at the JP Morgan building to something like 500 of the global press in there. We found a lot of interesting things in this report, and we'll be linking to it in Ageist. A couple of the things are that really the major factor, right? If you want to work longer, that's great. If you want to not retire, okay, that's great. If you want to retire and not work, that's also great. But what's happening here is we have this really large amount of people globally who are aging, who are over 65, over 75. These are some of the largest cohorts across countries in the world. And at the same time, there are labor shortages because of immigration laws and a lot of other things. So where's the mismatch here? Well, we have need and availability. But where's the friction? So what we identified was really the #1 thing is health and wellness. That's really the thing. There was a study that we pointed out of the UK, which showed that there were more people over 55. Their economic contribution was actually falling. And why was that? It was because of chronic health conditions. So there's just so much that's depending upon health and wellness out there. So this week on Just Try This, let's talk about chia seeds. All right, so you remember the Saturday Night Live and the chia pet. Okay, we're not doing that. What we're talking about here are chia seeds. They're quite budget friendly. I don't know, they're like $1 for a bag of these things. And how do you eat them? Well, you can eat them just straight up. I don't recommend that. It's much better if you put them in water and you do it like, I don't know, something like 8-to-1. You put about this many chia seeds in and about this much water, stir it up, put it in the fridge for like 10 minutes, and then it becomes this sort of like goopy stuff. So why do we like chia seeds? Well, there's a ton of nutritional value, but what I really like about them is it's somewhat similar to oatmeal. Now, I can't eat oatmeal because it drives my blood sugar crazy, but chia seeds have this similar soluble fiber. So why do we like soluble fiber? So soluble fiber is very helpful with things like LDL cholesterol, lowering our LDL cholesterol. So we want to be eating some of this. And the way that I've been doing it is with about this much chia seed pudding in the morning. I don't eat that much chia seed. That much chia seeds would be like that much pudding. We don't need that much. That's what I've been doing every morning. So this week on Just Try This, I'd like you guys to think about investigating the chia seed. Is that something you'd like to do? One of the things that I do is after it turns into this pudding stuff, I'll put a couple of walnuts in, I'll put little blueberries in, and then I eat that. So I get tons of nutrition, lots of phytochemicals in there, good fats, and also we're getting this soluble fiber, which will help reduce our LDL. So this week, just try this, chia seeds. Thank you for joining us on the show today. It's great to have you with us. I know that you have so many options out there with which you can spend your time, and you decided to spend it with us. And I really appreciate that. Next week, we got another good one coming up. Try those chia seeds. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you then. Take care.